The following story is about a man called Romer Troxell and his deceased son, Charlie. Romer Troxell was born and raised in Kentucky, and after completing 3 years of high school, enlisted in the Army on February the 10th, 1941. Romer later became a staff sergeant and fought in Italy, Algeria and Morocco and won a Purple Heart. During the war, Romer married Edna Kaufman, and on November the 6th, 1945, the couple had a son they named Charles. After the war, Romer got a job as maintenance man with US Steel, where the family moved to Pennsylvania and later bought a house in Levittown, Bucks County, Pennsylvania. The Troxell family lived on Vista Road in the Bristol township of Levittown, where the home was one of the more than 17,000 homes in the district. Romer Troxell and his wife Edna started divorce proceedings in the mid-1960s, but later managed to sort out their grievances, and as of late 1969 were still together. Their son Charlie left home at the age of 23 to work in the industrial city of Portage as a linesman for the Northern Indiana Public Service Company, who supplied gas and electricity to nearby Gary, Indiana. A short time after starting at his new job, Charlie bought a yellow Corvette. 6 months later, Charlie had planned to move back home, but unfortunately never made it. In the early hours of Friday, May the 22nd, 1970, the police found an unidentified body of a young man on the side of the road in Portage, where the cause of death was 4 bullets in his body, and all forms of ID had been stolen. With no forms of ID, police figured they were looking at a John Doe. The police were then contacted by a man named Donald Troxell, who feared that the identified man could be his nephew Charlie Troxell. Troxell gave the police the name and phone number of Charlie's parents, who immediately contacted Romer Troxell to seek further clarification on the deceased young man. After receiving the phone call, Charlie's family immediately headed to Indiana. The drive to Indiana took 12 painful hours as they trekked west through Pennsylvania, Ohio, and finally Indiana, and all they could think about was what horrific fate could have befallen their son, while at the same time hoping it was all a huge mistake. The family arrived at the Porter County morgue on Friday, May the 29th, which was cruelly his mother Edna's birthday. The Troxell family stood in fear as the coroner pulled back the sheet, exposing the body of their beloved Charlie, and they could not believe that their son was now gone. Questions are asked as to who could have inflicted such a cruel blow on their son, and why. As their family stood in paralysing grief, Romer suddenly heard a familiar voice which said, "Hi Pop, I knew you'd come. He's got my car." Romer looked around, totally stunned, and looked across at his family, and by the reaction it was obvious they'd not heard a thing. Charlie then repeated, "He's got my car." Romer quite possibly could have thought that the 700-mile drive, along with the added stress, had made him delusional. How else could he have heard the distinct voice of his deceased son? The shocked family spent the night at his brother's house in nearby Gary and kept in contact with the police, who at this stage were not telling them much other than that they were working on the case. The following Monday, on June the 1st, Charlie's words were still ringing in Romer's ears, and he and the family decided to take matters into their own hands. The family and his sister-in-law jumped in the car and started driving, even though Romer had no idea where he was going, as he did not know the area. Plus, he did not know what his son's car even looked like, but he could hear his son's voice telling him where to go. Charlie had directed him to a road, whereupon he could hear his son say, "Here he comes, Pop, he's got my car." Almost immediately, a yellow Corvette came over a hill towards them, and the family watched aghast as the driver parked in front of a high school. They observed a slender young man alight from his son's vehicle, and Romer immediately got out of the car and approached him, saying, "Isn't that Charlie Troxell's car?" The young man replied, "It was, but I bought it from him last Thursday," and then proceeded to get the title from the glove box. Romer then heard his son say, "Be careful, Pop, he's got a gun." Then Romer quickly responded, "No, that's okay. Say, have you seen Charlie lately?" But in a surprising statement, the young man said, "He's dead. Got shot up for the money from selling the car." After his comment, Romer knew he had to keep his son's murderer talking, and as he kept him occupied, his sister-in-law snuck out of the car to call the police. A short time later, a patrol car arrived, and Romer immediately shouted to them, "He killed my son." The police were initially confused and unsure what to do, but nevertheless held the young man. They learned that his name was Arthur Wagner, and then called the station to get further details. Within a few seconds, the police officers were alerted to the fact that the car was wanted in a homicide investigation and that Arthur Wagner to be arrested on suspicion of murder. While Wagner was safely handcuffed in the police car, the officers checked the glove box in the Corvette and found a .32 caliber revolver, and on the floor were 4 spent cartridges. Romer freely admitted to the police that his deceased son had spoken to him and had guided him to where he would be able to find Arthur Wagner. The police themselves said that they never gave Romer Troxell any details about Wagner or the investigation. Romer had also told his family beforehand that he was being guided by his son Charlie. A short time after his arrest, Arthur Wagner confessed to the murder and said that Charlie had sold him the car for $3,000, but Wagner's cheque bounced. Wagner then asked Charlie to meet him on that fateful Friday, May the 22nd. But before Charlie could hand him the cash, Wagner shot him 4 times and then drove away in the Corvette. The unusual thing is that Romer never heard from his son again, and he never believed in such things, and said he was not even a religious man. It is strange that Romer was the only family member that Charlie had communicated with, and maybe it was because of their strong father-son bond that Charlie was determined to seek justice for his murder. Romer Troxell died in 2011.